Hey, Lindsay. I'm a huge fan of your work. You've been posting about Bitcoin for a while. Before that, you were posting about just personal finance, investing. How's everything on your
Hey,
end?
what's up, Rajat? I'm doing really well. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you inviting me to do this. This is awesome.
Absolutely. So, the reason why I wanted you to come on my show is because you recently figured out what Bitcoin is, and you've been posting about it as much as you can on Twitter. From my perception here, you've been giving us so much value, creating so much value. And there was one tweet of yours that there's actually a few of your tweets, but there's one tweet that really stood out to me. And the reason why it stood out is because I thought it was a great. I think it told a story about how most people get into Bitcoin. So let
Yeah.
me share the tweet. So you said my Bitcoin journey these last 9 months. What's Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a scam. What resources? Can you go through this with us? Can you go through this for my audience here? Just so you can read through it. You can give your points on each one, I
Yeah,
guess.
absolutely. So I would say I first heard about Bitcoin in like 2018 or 2019. And back then, like I knew nothing about it. It was just like I knew it just to me seemed like an online coin, but I knew nothing else. And I honestly didn't care about it. And I remember in 2019, I bought like somebody had told me to buy it. And this was whenever I like took advice from people on the internet to like buy and sell things and didn't do any of my own research. And because of that, didn't have my own conviction in anything, was just like, you know, doing whatever other people were doing. And I remember someone telling me to buy Bitcoin back in like early 2019. And Bitcoin at that time was $8,000 and I bought $2,000 worth. So I bought like 0.25 of a coin, which is crazy to think about that you could get 0.25 of a coin for 2,000 back then, just considering what it is now. But I held on to it for like a couple of weeks and I made like tiny gains and I sold it right away for like a couple $100. And so then I didn't think about Bitcoin at all. And then in 2023, in August of 2023, I started this Twitter page where I was talking about traditional finance and my journey through personal finance and paying off debt and buying stocks and buying real estate and all of that type of, all that good stuff. And one day in December or maybe it was November, December last year, I posted about maxing out my Roth IRA. And Jeff Punter, who is like a well-known person in Bitcoin now, and in MicroStrategy, and he's all over, and he's doing great things. He commented on my post in like the nicest way possible, and was like, "This is great that you're maxing out a Roth IRA, but you're missing out with Bitcoin." And I just like was like, "Well, like, what is Bitcoin? Like, what's the hype about? What is it like other than an online token? Like, what is it?" And so that was my very first question, November of 2023. So then I started and I, would type it into Google. And of course, there's going to be a bunch of things that are going to come up that are in favor of it and against it. And like a bunch of things, like it's a Ponzi scheme. It's going to zero. It's like the greater fool's theory, like all of this stuff, just about how Bitcoin was a scam. And so I'm like, this sounds like too good to be true. Like the people who say it's going to fix the world. They say fix the money, fix the world. They say it's going to fix everything. Like it just seems too good to be true. This must be a scam. But then I started digging deeper into it and I'm starting to think like I can either have the approach of like all of these people who believe in Bitcoin have been fooled, or there's some really, really smart people in Bitcoin who know more than I do, and I should look into it myself to figure out what they know. And I kind of took that route and I just started like reading and researching anything I could. So it started off with Jeff being like, "Hey, read Broken Money. And if you won't buy it yourself, I'll buy you a copy and send it to your house." And I was like, "No, you don't have to do that. I'll buy it. Like, I'll read it." So I read Broken Money. I read the Bitcoin Standard. I have The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, like sitting right here. I have a bunch of other books. I started like Simply Bitcoin, the podcast, listening to Michael Saylor episodes, and just completely went
Yeah.
down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin. And I came to the conclusion that like I would rather have a 1% allocated to Bitcoin and have Bitcoin go to zero than have no money allocated to Bitcoin and fiat go to zero, essentially, like the decline of the US dollar. And
Yeah.
so that's where I kind of landed, like let me just put in 1 to 2% as a hedge and leave it at that. Then,
So that
what'd you
was level
say?
five. So
Yeah,
that
so
was
that
level
was level
five.
5. And of course, I
Okay.
couldn't stop reading and researching at that point. Like I was too far into it and, learning about it. Like I wanted to learn more. Like I was like, this is really intriguing. This is interesting. Like this might be, the greatest invention asset ever made. Like let me see what else is out there about it. So then I keep looking into it. And then I start realizing and telling myself, like, how silly is it that I get up every single day and go to a job that I don't necessarily like to get the same money that our government prints more of whenever they want to give to anybody that they want who I don't have a say in? Like, I'm watching them send $200 billion to Ukraine, and I'm watching them do things with money that we don't have in ways that maybe, that I agree or don't agree with. But like, why am I exchanging my time and energy for this piece of paper that other people have the power to print whenever they want and do whatever they want with? It just seemed so silly. And so then I started, thinking like, because Bitcoin's finite, because there's 21 million, obviously millions of them have been, lost at this point. So there's really not 21 million in circulation, but just knowing it's a finite asset, you start to realize that this is a race to accumulate as much as you possibly can. And so the thought of buying and selling the highs and trying to buy back in at the lows and, trying to play this game is very silly because at some point, with all of the people and these institutions and these countries that are buying, you're not going to be able to buy back in for less than you sold for. And why would you sell something that you're actively trying to race to accumulate more because it's going to eventually run out? It's not, there's not going to be more of it. So in my mind, it was like, I don't own enough. I need to own more. 1 to 2% isn't enough. Is 5% enough? Is 10%? Is 20%? Is everything? Where am I at? Where am I going to land? And then I started with, the questions of what can I sell to buy more? So, am I going to sell clothes? Am I going to sell shoes? Am I going to sell my stocks? Am I going to sell certain holdings? Am I going to sell my real estate portfolio? Some of those things are in motion now, which is really interesting considering it's a year later. And now I have a property going on the market on Monday that, I'm going to sell and going to put the proceeds into Bitcoin. And, then the level 10 is just Bitcoin's never going to stop going up because fiat's infinite. Money's the money that's going to be coming in, into our economy, the money that's going to be circulating, the total global wealth, like that's constantly going to be increasing. And because Bitcoin is finite, it's going to go up forever. And there might be dips and it might, we're going to have cycles and it's going to have highs and lows, but over the long term, it's going to be up into the right.
Yeah, and I think I've seen you become more and more bullish on this. I've seen there's actually another tweet that I want to refer to here. So there's this one right here. Um, I think a lot of people, even me for example, I was actually driving Uber Eats for a while to
Mm-hmm.
accumulate Bitcoin, and in the moment it felt like, oh, this is terrible. But then once you really get what Bitcoin is, it's worth it, right? Because you're giving away your time, your effort, your resources for something that nobody can create more of, and that's
Oh yeah.
huge,
I mean, I was out driving for Uber
right?
earlier today before I got on to your podcast. Like I'm still
Wow.
out driving for Uber multiple days a week and I've still put every single dollar I've made from it into Bitcoin. And I'm gonna
Wow.
continue to do that until I hit one whole coin because that's my goal currently is to get one whole coin. And obviously I know that when I get to one whole coin, that's not going to be the end. I'm going to want more and going to keep stacking. And this is a lifelong
Yeah.
thing. I don't see myself ever not storing, the money that I make in Bitcoin. But what's really funny about you mentioning Uber Eats and Uber is that, the money that I made driving for Uber in May of this year and put directly into Bitcoin, those earnings are much more now. I mean, the dollars
Yeah.
that I made in May converted to Bitcoin are worth double now, just in the increase in the price for Bitcoin. So it's interesting when you look at it from that perspective too.
Yeah, and that actually brings up another point that I want to talk about. This is something that I've been thinking about. I've talked about it with a couple other people, but I think with Bitcoin, it's so special because you can pretty much just set your own income, right? So let's say, for example, for yourself, you buy your Bitcoin, or if you have a US dollar standard, if you think of it from a US dollar standard, you can get your US dollars at some point. But let's say, for example, if you work a job and you just get US dollars, you put those US dollars in your bank account and you use them at some point. Over time, in a way, your income is decreasing because of
Mhm.
the inflation, right? So if you have your, let's say, for example, your Bitcoin is decreasing by 5, 10% per, or your US dollars are losing 5, 10% per year, that means that the work that you put in to get those US dollars is
Mhm.
decreasing in value, right? So let's say you work your job, you deliver food for, let's say you deliver food, you get $20 worth of US, you put US dollars in your bank account. Over time, that $20 is going to buy less and less and less, meaning that your wage is decreasing. So when you need it, you don't have the money there. Then on the other hand, with Bitcoin, let's say you put your money into Bitcoin and 10 years from now, you finally want to use this money. It's like your wage has increased. You're setting your own wage. Your wage is going to increase because your purchasing power is going to increase. And that's just crazy to me. You have to do with other things. Let's say, for example, it's stocks. You have to take risk. With Bitcoin, you don't. I don't think when you really understand how Bitcoin works, I don't think that it's risky the way that people think it is. People think it's volatile. Okay, yeah, that's perfectly fine. But volatility isn't risk. What are your thoughts on that? Any
I
thoughts on that
completely
part?
agree with that. And, what I would say is like people that, go to work and get their paycheck and they put their paycheck into their bank account, they don't realize by looking at it that the value of the money is going down because they see, okay, I put $1,000 in there and next year when I look at it, it has $1,000 in there. What they don't see is that the purchasing power of that $1,000 is what has gone down. So it's not
Yeah.
that the money, the number has gone down, the value of everything else has gone up, which means the money that you've made is less. And that's what I think that people are missing with the whole saving or saving in fiat or leaving money in your checking or in your savings with the difference of Bitcoin. But I completely understand what you're saying about like, you're giving yourself a pay raise down the line. And I think that's a main part of Bitcoin is like having a low time preference. Like you are doing something today to have a better future later and understanding that like volatility just mean like if you just look up the definition of volatility and the definition of risk, they're very different things. Like volatility, like yeah, we might be going up and down, we might have quick spikes, increases, decreases, but that doesn't mean it's risky. And I think the best thing that I've learned from social media the last year is that there's two types of people: the types of people who think allocating money to Bitcoin is risky, and people that think not allocating
Hmm.
money to Bitcoin is risky. And that's been super interesting to find out.
I saw that tweet. So you posted that. I think it was maybe a few days ago. Was that, or maybe a while ago? I don't remember what it was. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember exactly what you said, and that's so true. It's so true because there are people who think, oh, Bitcoin is this risky thing that's going to decrease in value and it's going to keep decreasing in value because they see their experience is so negative, right? They saw it at 61K. That's when everyone was talking about it last year, and that's what shows you that people don't zoom
Yep.
out. I would You'd be surprised how many comments I've gotten with people saying, "Oh, what about all the people who bought in 2021?" This was Keep in mind Bitcoin went from 15K all the way to 50K, 60K. People are thinking, "Oh, what about all the people who bought in 2021? They're not even break even yet. What's happening now? Are they break even or did they make a ton of money compared to every single other person out there?" I mean, that's really what people don't get. It's what, like you said, there's people who think that it's risky and there's people who understand that it's not risky, and that's the that's the most difficult thing to get your head around. Would you be able to explain what was the thing that really got you over that hump? Like um the point that really changed your mind on Bitcoin versus, let's say, other assets?
Yeah, I guess like, people have asked me this question before, and it's really, really hard to pinpoint like one thing because I was so like knee deep into so many resources and reading so many things and watching so many things. I will say, like, Michael Saylor just has a knack for like orange pilling people and the way that he explains things.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of things that like really stick out to me. And one of them was when he was talking about um, you know, more dollars can be printed every single day, and more real estate can be built every single day. And countries like Dubai are creating new land every day. and gold is mined every single day, and gold is not finite. We don't know how much is in the world. Every time we go mining for gold, we find more. So how much really is there? And Bitcoin is the only asset that's finite. And when you think of it in that way, it starts to like click, at least in my mind, of would you rather own one of infinity, one of, unlimited amount of something, or would you rather own one of 21 million or one of 16 million that's in circulation or whatever it is? Like, and, another thing is like, somebody that I really, really like in the Bitcoin space is Chris Johnson. And, he started with stocks and trading and
Oh
the
yeah.
Wealth Squad, and he's put out videos. And he made a video once that was like, if you have $10,000 in your bank account and the US government, like, me and you know that since 2020, 80% of the dollars that are in circulation have been printed since 2020, which means inflation and like money printing has gone up exponentially just since COVID. But if you had $10,000 in your bank account and it was 10,000 of, however many trillions, like overnight, now your 10,000 is, much less than,
Significantly
yeah,
worth less.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I think like that painted a really good picture for me, whenever I put that side by side with Michael Saylor saying, like, if you wanted to buy a property in France from the United States today on the weekend and you just wanted to send them the money for low fees across the world, like thinking of how outdated our banking system is and how Saylor broke down our banking system, how outdated it is, how, slow it is, how it's closed on the weekends, it's closed in the evenings, how hard it is to move money, and just all of those things. It starts to just seem like we're only going to become more of a digital world, and it makes sense using digital money, and we're not going to go backwards. And so why are we still like stuck in the past of, using antiquated, technology, I guess, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I wanted to show you a chart. I'm not sure if you've seen this before. You've probably seen my other charts that I post. There's this website called Price in Bitcoin 21. They basically price everything in Bitcoin and then they show you what the difference is. So have you seen
I
this chart by any
actually
chance?
watched one of your podcasts before where I think you brought up this website.
Yes. So what this shows you is the United States average annual wage in terms of Bitcoin, and it's crazy to me like how quickly this number has dropped. So we can see here 2021 2011, your average annual wage was 12,328 Bitcoin. Could you imagine like if you worked for Bitcoin at that point, you have
I
12,000
know that's
Bitcoin.
crazy to think about. And now we're like fighting and clawing to get one.
Insane. Yeah. So 12,000 Bitcoin back then, but back then in US dollars, this is where we go back to the nominal versus real value I guess argument. So we can see here in 2011 in US dollars you were making 40,000 US dollars. 12,000 Bitcoin versus 40,000 US dollars. So that was the value. One Bitcoin was worth about $4
Mhm.
or so. In 2015, your wage has increased in US dollars. Your wage in US dollars has increased significantly over time, just linearly. Like it just keeps going up. It's gone to 61,000. But in terms of Bitcoin, it's dropped. Look at that number, 0.62 Bitcoin.
That's crazy. And just imagine how it's going to be in the next 10.
Insane. And I think this is partly what makes me think that more and more people are wanting Bitcoin for their wages, because what this shows you, I don't know if my viewers can really make the connection here, but what this shows you is the supply of wages is increasing, the supply of Bitcoin is decreasing. The amount of the supply of people who are willing to exchange their time, their energy, their resources for Bitcoin is constantly increasing, meaning that because the supply is going up, the price is decreasing. And that just, once you make that connection, it's almost impossible not to see where this is going. Okay, and I wanted to show another one of your
Yeah.
tweets. This is what you were saying. Don't borrow conviction, put in the hours to learn. You mentioned this before. Do you still invest in real estate, stocks, ETFs, all of that? Oh, sorry. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So I bought my last property in November of last year. Like we closed on November 30th of last year. And Jeff's comment on my Roth IRA post was like the second week of November last year. So I was like still
Mm.
actively buying real estate then. And I haven't bought any real estate in 2024. And like I told you a little bit ago, we're going to be putting our one of our properties on the market on Monday to sell. And so no, we are no longer like growing the real estate portfolio. We are eventually going to sell them all. We're, not immediately, but just when the time is right. And I do still invest in my company 401k up to the match, and I do still max out my Roth IRA. But other than that, all like the money that I've made this year in excess of, my bills, my expenses, my 401k, my Roth IRA, everything else this year, you know, primarily has gone to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is our goal, like is our main focus, I think right now until we hit one coin. And then maybe we'll reassess, like maybe I won't drive for Uber anymore, or maybe we'll, make some changes in our lives. But I am not actively buying like individual stocks or real estate, just doing some traditional and then the rest Bitcoin.
Amazing. That's a huge change. I feel like just getting that far into Bitcoin and finally understanding that. I mean, maybe this is just a little bit too far, but realizing that you don't need anything else to save, that's the game changer. That changes everything. That makes it so that you don't need to invest in single family homes. You don't need to invest in companies. You don't need to do any of that. You can just buy Bitcoin, save for the future, and then potentially at some point invest in yourself. Let's say you start a business, or you you invest in your life, in your relationships, in your of course your finances. You're investing in um, just everything around you, the real life, not other companies that have no relationship to you. They don't really care about you. They don't have your best interests in mind. All that. I want to ask you, what are your what are your tips for my audience on how they can accumulate more Bitcoin? You're doing Uber. You're increasing your income that way. What else would you say?
I would say like I don't only do Uber, and I did make a post about this a few days ago of like all of the different income streams that I put into Bitcoin right now. So just to back up for 1 second, I will answer that question, but I just want to say like whenever I started really going down the rabbit hole and learning about Bitcoin, I started to ask myself, why was I buying real estate? Why was I deciding that real estate was the path, and why was I going down that? And I think that what I, came to the conclusion was that I was storing my value in real estate because historically it's been a good store of value. The value of homes has gone up over time. And the idea of having a tenant or somebody in there that's paying down the mortgage and, the value is going up was always more to me than the cash flow I was making from it. And so what we have, I work a W-2, my spouse works a W-2. We have a few properties, side hustle, make money in different areas, content creation, things like that. The cash flow that we're making from our properties is not paying our bills, is not sustaining our lives. It was more so the store of value, the loan pay down plus appreciation play. And so when you learn about Bitcoin, you start to realize that like you can have the same appreciation, actually a better appreciation in the money that you put in without all the headaches that come with real estate. Like, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, all of the things. So that really was what for us was like, let's sell this one and eventually sell the rest of them. So if you are looking for somewhere to store your money, I feel like Bitcoin is the way to go. If you are somebody who like even needs cash flow to pay your bills, I still feel like Bitcoin's the way to go. But I think a lot of people still feel like real estate is that play. And so I've talked to a lot of real estate people about that. But getting back to your question, like I think that setting automatic buys of Bitcoin is the way to go. Um, Basically, what I mean by that is like set up recurring buys on whatever platform that you're using and go live your life. Always be stacking, buying the highs, buying the lows, buying the middle, and then find a way to make more money. So, what's that? What does that look like? Content creation, Uber Eats, gig work. I've seen people walking dogs to make money to buy Bitcoin. side jobs,
Wow.
bartending, serving, like all of these things that I've done. There was a point when I was paying off debt where I sold all of my Jordans. I sold a bunch of clothes on Marketplace and was just like balls to the wall selling stuff to get more money to pay off my debt. People can do that exact same strategy and just use the money to buy Bitcoin. So what we do now is we use the cash flow from our properties to buy Bitcoin. We have a recurring buy that we use from our W-2s to buy Bitcoin. We put all of our Twitter money into Bitcoin subscribers and ad revenue. And I drive for Uber and we put that into Bitcoin. So having different ways of getting money and using it to buy Bitcoin is going to accelerate the process. But simply automating it, I think, is key.
I think one thing that that a lot of people don't really think about, based on everything that you said, you can keep doing that. You can keep adding more and more Bitcoin to your stack. You can keep working harder and creating more and more value. I think a lot of people don't see the fact that, let's say today, so we were looking at those numbers with the average salary. Your average salary in the US right now is 0.627 Bitcoin. So if you get to one coin, let's say whenever if somebody gets to one coin, at some point, the average salary will be zero point 0.5 Bitcoin. Then it'll be 0.25 Bitcoin. Then it'll be 0.1 Bitcoin. Then it'll be 0.05 Bitcoin. So let's flip the switch. So we can see that at one point, one Bitcoin is right now, one Bitcoin is 1.5 years salary. When it drops to 0.5, it'll be 2 years salary. Then 0.25, it'll be 4 years salary. Then 0.125, it'll be 8 years salary. 0.1, 10 years salary. And it'll keep decreasing. That's what people don't see. At some point, I think one Bitcoin will buy 100 years salary, 200 years salary, 500 years salary. Could you imagine just you putting in the work, doing your Uber? You're working hard. You're putting in extra time to accumulate this thing. At some point, it's gonna buy you 200 years
It's
salary.
crazy to think about. And
Absolutely
like what's
insane.
crazy is the amount of people out there who still don't believe it or see it or still don't own any. That is also what makes me like so bullish, because I do think that me and you, we live in an echo chamber on the internet of people who know what Bitcoin is, and there's
Yeah.
people around them talking about it 24/7. You put out 5, 10, 15 Bitcoin posts per day. Like, people that follow you are seeing that stuff every single day. So they're hearing it and they're getting it. They're getting little nuggets. And I think that's helping more people to start buying. And every time somebody reaches out to me and says, I just bought my first bit of Bitcoin, it just makes me so happy. And these days it's happening a lot more. And I think because the prices increase, that's part of it. People are seeing, like, oh, maybe these Bitcoin people weren't as crazy as we thought. Like, maybe they are right. Maybe I do need to get on board. But what really stands out to me is when you get off the internet and you close your phone and you get out in the world and you go to a family function, or you go to Thanksgiving, or you go to your in-laws' house, or you go talk to some friends, and Bitcoin's not the topic of conversation at all, at least in my circles. And maybe that's because I'm a woman, or maybe it's because of where I live or who I hang out with. I don't know. But all I can say is that a lot, actually, I'll change that. Nobody in my personal life, besides maybe one other person, buys Bitcoin actively. And less than that, know what it is, or know its benefit, or know anything about it, or have put any real work into understanding it. And so I still feel like it's so early.
Yeah. So if I were to, let's say, for example, if we're having this conversation, if you had to orange pill someone, what would you say to them? Let's say, for example, if you shared this conversation with your family, with your friends, whoever, and they trust you, they believe in you, they see what you're doing here. If you wanted to give them as much of your knowledge as possible, what would you say? How would you? I guess what would be your elevator pitch on Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, my dad's 60th birthday was last weekend, and I was sitting around with people, and there was about 5 of us that were sitting around, and one guy who actually owned quite a bit of Bitcoin has recently sold off a lot, which made my heart break a little bit. But we were talking about it, and other people joined in, and so it ended up being this conversation. But I think, the main points that I was making was about, it being the perfect money. When you really look into what is money, it is a unit of account, a store of value, a way of exchanging goods and services with other people. And whenever you look at what is money, you start to realize that Bitcoin is a superior money. And then you talk about it being finite, and you talk about money printing and hyperinflation and the value of your dollars going down, and how real estate and land and gold is infinite and Bitcoin is not. And then you get into the market cap of Bitcoin compared to other assets, I think really starts to steal the show, because when you're talking to a group of people, the very first thing that they believe is that they're late to the party. They missed the train. Bitcoin's already $100,000. It's too late for me to buy. But whenever you get into the conversations with people about market cap and how currently Bitcoin only makes up 1.7 trillion of the market cap when there's 900 trillion in global wealth, you start to see that it's very small in the big scheme of things. Gold is still 17 trillion. Real estate's like 56 trillion. Like we just overcame silver, and silver's been around for hundreds of years and Bitcoin's been around for 15 less. So the fact that we've already overcome silver lets you know that we're on to something, but that the way, the journey that we still have in terms of market cap is still major, because a lot of people ahead of us in market cap are individual companies. Amazon, Google, Meta, like those are single companies with a board of directors. How can a currency that is one of the best store of value, the most superior savings technology ever, be valued less than one single company? I just see it as something that has a much bigger potential and that people lose sight of because they see the price. That was very long-winded, which I apologize.
No, that was amazing. I feel like that's so important. So what do you think? So do you think that these companies are eventually going to start buying Bitcoin? What do you think that that's even a
Yes.
possibility? Because I feel like sometimes these board of directors, like they probably have an ego, right? They're probably thinking, oh, we're gonna buy it when it pulls back, or there's no way this thing is going to pass company's our company's valuation, so we're not going to buy any. It's going down. We'd rather invest in buying back our shares, or we'd rather invest in giving out a bigger dividend and all that stuff. People will come to us. Is there even a reason for people to invest in these companies anymore? So two questions there. Do you think these companies will buy Bitcoin? And then number two, is there a reason to buy these companies if Bitcoin can outperform them? What's the point of investing?
Those are great questions. I do think that companies are going to start adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet. And the reason I say that is because, like, as of today, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you have way more knowledge on Bitcoin than I do, and I'm like still new to this, but there's like 25 major hedge funds in the United States, and the last I checked, 13 of them have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So
Wow, I
yeah,
didn't know that.
so maybe I need like fact checked or something, but I'm pretty sure that like just over half of major hedge funds have added it. And we see companies like MicroStrategy, like Semler, like these companies that are playing this out in real time of the infinite money glitch, if you will. I think other companies are going to add it to their balance sheet in very small quantities at first, but when you look at the big scheme of things, a small quantity, like 1% to some of these countries, is big, big dollars. And I find that very interesting. And I was listening to the Simply Bitcoin podcast a week and a half ago, and they were talking about how Goldman Sachs is one of the largest banks in the world, and that they have some of the most the wealthiest clients, if you will. Like a lot of them, I don't know what type of gold, like, what accounts, but I guess there's some accounts where you have to have $10 million in net worth as a minimum to be able to bank with them. And they were talking about how the wealthiest clients in the world came to them and said that they wanted exposure to Bitcoin and with their money. And so then Goldman Sachs ended up buying like $710 million worth of Bitcoin. And this was like a headline on one of the Simply Bitcoin podcast episodes of how much, one of the biggest banks in the world is now buying. I feel like where we're at in history, like this isn't the end. These big companies and big banks
No.
buying is not the end, the downfall. This is just the beginning. And when other banks see Goldman Sachs doing this or other companies doing this, I feel like they're going to follow suit. And I think the recent presidency and what Trump is saying he's going to do with Bitcoin Reserve has accelerated this even quicker than I think a lot of people probably thought.
Yeah, definitely. And it's gonna. I think it's gonna keep going. I don't see. I see this as the beginning. I see a lot of people questioning about why we want institutions to buy Bitcoin, why we want banks to buy Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is money for everyone. Everyone needs it. It's money. It's not an investment. It's not a commodity that you can do other things with. You can't use it to. You can't use it as a way to add to electronics, maybe to improve your electronics, like with gold, for example. You can't drink it like with water. You can't build houses with it like with lumber, but it works perfectly as money because you can transfer, store, and account for value with it. And that's the key. That's the most important thing. And I think that every single bank, like you said, every single bank, every single financial institution, every single institution in general is going to have exposure to Bitcoin. Otherwise, they're going to zero.
Have you seen some of the like videos about lending of money to people that have Bitcoin on their balance sheet versus not? Have you seen some of those videos? Okay,
I
I'm gonna
haven't.
send you some after this, just because
Can
I'm interested. I was just gonna
Oh,
ask you
amazing.
your take, but I'll send you some, and then we can talk about it later.
Oh yeah, of course that works. Okay, perfect. I wanted to ask you. You mentioned before, maybe it's women that aren't like because your
Mhm.
social circle. You said maybe women aren't getting Bitcoin. Do you know? Would you be able to say why? Because I mean, I can't think of a reason. Maybe I'm not getting it, but because in general, if you looked at the stats, women are better investors than men. Women make easily 1 to 2% more than men on average. But then I feel like maybe it's because of the risk involved. Can you give me your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
What
this
what do you
is
think?
totally anecdotal. I have absolutely nothing to back this up. This is just my opinion.
Of course.
But I think in general, I think men are more into personal finance and investing in general. Like men are, at least the men that I talk to, like are investing the money for their household and are setting up their budget and are paying the bills. Not that it's all his money that are paying it. It might be combined, but he's the one that's
Of
actively
course.
doing those things. And the women in my life that I talk to, a lot of them just have other interests. Like they're in general not interested in finance. So they're not talking about finance. They might be talking
Mm,
about, trips, family, kids sports, work, all of these things. Things around the house, just anything. But not so much interested in personal finance. And that is why I started posting on Twitter a year ago, is because I wanted to be surrounded by other people who were interested in the things that I was interested in, which is investing in personal finance and money, and now Bitcoin, obviously. So I think just because they're less into the circle of money, I think that they're less exposed to it than men are just in general. But I agree with you. I do think women are great investors, the ones who put in the time and the effort and like learn about it, have great results. And I think it's just because like a lot of women I think are okay with like setting things up automated and then just like letting it run and going about their lives and don't feel the need, at least, some, like to tinker with it or to change it or to let me see if I can beat the market or let me see if I can trade or like, well, let me day trade or like, I think they're just more so like steady Eddie.
yeah, I think the beating the market part. I think so many people are told not to try to do it because Wall Street is the only thing that can do it. Nobody else can do it. It's too difficult. It's too hard to wrap your head around. I used to be like that. Keep in mind, I have the finance background, so I'm not. I'm not even surprised that the majority of people don't think they can do it. I personally didn't think I could do it. I just thought, oh, I'll buy index funds and I'll work on increasing my income, and that's the only way to go. I think the majority of people do think of it that way because I mean, technically, the way that I see it, actually, I think you were the one who mentioned this before. This is a great segue, but investing is basically like a second job, right? You have your first job, then you have your second job. So your first job is your 9 to 5, whatever, however you create value, and then you have to invest. I think you sent it to me. You wrote a post about this. Are you
Yeah,
able to go into
absolutely.
that?
It was basically just like if you want to get ahead in the United States, like investing has to be your part time job. Like, not only do you have to be really, really good at making money, you have to be equally as good at investing your money if you want to, escape the rat race, become work optional, retire early, or just retire in general. Like, if you're really, really good at making money, but you don't do anything with that money but let it sit in a checking account or a savings account, you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to outlast or like, overcome inflation, and you're
to
not
get
going to
ahead.
be able to quit your job.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, uh, just a regular W 2 worker, you put all of your energy into making money and how do I make more money? And then when you get that money, now you have to be an expert in single family rentals or in multifamily rentals or
Yeah.
in assessing a company and their balance sheet and how their PE ratio, or assessing this index fund, or assessing this piece of land and its potential growth, or this neighborhood or this community. And so like a majority of your time was being spent earning money, finding a way to earn more money, and then figuring out what to do with that money to grow that money so you can eventually live a different life. And when you find Bitcoin, it gets a lot simpler because now it's like, how do I earn money? I want to be really good at earning money, of course. I want to bring in as much as I can. Then I use it to buy Bitcoin. I don't have
Yeah.
to, do all of this research and back and work after you do the work to learn about Bitcoin, of course. Then it's just earn money and buy Bitcoin. It's a lot more simple and it allows you to live your life.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry about whether or not the executive at this company that you're working at is going to make some stupid decision that screws you over. You're not going to have to worry about whether or not your tenant is going to burn down your property and maybe insurance won't pay you off. You don't have to worry about whether the tenant is going to stop paying and there's nothing that you can do about it. I'm in Ontario, so in Ontario, there are people who have like during the lockdowns, people were dealing with tenants who weren't paying for a
Mm-hmm.
year, which is crazy. Like, how much money are you going to lose in that situation, right? And you don't have to worry about that because there's no tenants with Bitcoin. There's no, there's no executive team. There's no voting. You're owning this thing, and it's already set in stone. The supply is set in stone. Nobody can change it. What it does is set in stone. The way that the network works, the production is set in stone. All that stuff is just already there, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. You don't have to think about, oh, what's the cap rate on this? What's this? What's that? What's this? So would you tell anybody if somebody were to ask you randomly, let's say they think of you as the personal finance money expert, they see you and they ask you, I want to buy a rental property. What would you say to them?
Research Bitcoin.
Research Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Easy.
I mean, I get the people who are anti Bitcoin, or at least anti like Bitcoin bros, say like study Bitcoin is like the most horrible phrase in the world. Like
Yeah.
study that, like that's everybody's go
Yeah.
to for everything kind of thing. And I get where they're coming from because I have come across people that are like overbearing when it comes to Bitcoin, but they're overbearing when it comes to
Yeah.
anything. There's those types of people in every realm. But I think if somebody really wanted to buy a rental and they're dead set on doing that, then my honest approach would be, good luck. If you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to help you. Um, I am kind of the opinion of like, do I think Bitcoin is a superior asset? Yes. Do I think Bitcoin is a better store of value than real estate? Yes. Do I think that everybody should own some Bitcoin? Yes. Am I going to judge, or am I going to like judge other people's decisions, or them as a person if they decide to buy a single family rental instead of Bitcoin? No, because
Mhm.
everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I fully believe that people have different goals and different outlooks and different perspectives, and I can't put myself in your shoes. All I can do is talk about Bitcoin, talk about what it's done for me, talk about why I think it's a better asset, talk about why it makes sense for me to buy it instead of rentals. And if you don't agree, that is perfectly fine. That's kind of my approach, and I'm here to talk about Bitcoin with people that want to talk about it and want to learn. And if you don't, or you don't agree with it, or you don't like it and you don't want to talk about it with me, then that's perfectly fine too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you summed it up really well there. I think study. There's two phrases. I think study Bitcoin and Bitcoin fixes this. Those two piss people off so
Or
much
have
because they think they've studied Bitcoin. Right. They think they've studied Bitcoin, but they haven't. And then they think that Bitcoin can't fix anything because it's digital. It has no real world implications. There's no real world utility. So how can it fix anything? Like I've made videos about, oh, Bitcoin fixes our food. And that is just for most people that's just so abstract they can't even make the connection, because in our current system our money is our money and we don't even think about it, right? We don't think further than, oh, this is used to buy things that I need, this is used to buy things that I want. There's no other reason to even think about how money works. Most people just wrap their head around the fact that, oh, we get dollars and we exchange them for goods and services. No, there's no thoughts beyond that, right? And it's like you said, once you study it, once you see it, once you go deeper, it actually makes me mad how everybody is working for just pieces of paper. They're sacrificing their time, their energy, their resources, their hobbies, their time with their family, their potential to do literally whatever they want to, their vacation time, their ability to explore the world. They're risking all of it. They're giving it all away to accumulate pieces of paper. So this goes into another segue that I have for the. Actually, do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, I was just going
Before
to
we go
say,
into something else.
like, this piece of paper that's not backed by anything. Like in the past,
Yeah.
prior to what, 1972, you could take those dollars and you could exchange them for gold because they were backed by gold. It was like, we'll give you this amount of money, it's backed by gold. But now, the amount of dollars that are in circulation, do we even know if there's enough gold to back all of those dollars in circulation? And like, I just feel like there hasn't been a lot of transparency with that. But when people say Bitcoin's backed by nothing, like, I want to know what they think that their dollars are backed by: the military, the government, gold. Like, what is your, like, point of view, I guess, what, like, the people that say like it's backed by nothing, like, what do they think the things that they're working for on a daily basis are backed by?
I think there's a case to be made that the dollar is backed by the government, but I mean, sorry, not the government,
Mhm.
by the military. But in reality, the people in the military are probably not going to work once they find out that the dollar is essentially worthless. Why would they risk their lives,
That's a great point.
right? I personally wouldn't. Maybe there are other people who are more patriotic than me. They're willing to sacrifice their life for basically nothing, but I'm not. I'm personally not, and I'm sure you're not
No.
either, right?
Um,
And it goes much deeper than that. It keeps going. So I wanted to ask you. This is a question that I ask all my guests. If I'm sure you've probably seen me ask this. But the question is, what do you think are the most important downstream effects of Bitcoin? So the world is going to eventually go to a Bitcoin standard. I think you think this. I think this. What do you think is going to be the biggest change that we're going to see?
um, actually, I haven't put a lot of thought into this one, to be honest. Um, I think we're going to see a lot of people who aren't going to put up with certain 9 to 5 schedules, certain ways of
Okay.
making
Yeah.
money, certain jobs that I
Yeah.
think people aren't going to be willing to take. I've seen some posts about people um, talking about how Bitcoin has made them unemployable. And I think
Wow.
that that's really interesting. Like, if once you store enough money in Bitcoin and the price of Bitcoin gets to where it's going, what would be the incentive to exchange your time and energy for dollars? And what jobs would you be willing to do to get it? I don't know. I think about that quite frequently, but I don't know if that really answers your question about like downstream effects. I guess it is like, what's my biggest question is like, what's going to happen to the US dollar? Is it still going to be a powerhouse? Is the government going to implement, the Bitcoin reserve? Is, like, just that discussion. I don't know. I think that's one that I need to take away from this conversation and like really think about more.
I actually think you made a great point there. People aren't going to want to work jobs that they don't like. They're going to go to things that maybe they like more. And I feel like that's going to lead to a lot of happier people.
And the question is though, like, who's going to do those jobs? Like, what'd you say?
Automation.
Yeah,
Automation.
AI, robot.
Yeah. Like I used to work as a fixed income
Okay.
analyst. And what we would do is basically we would analyze bonds, we would rebalance portfolios, we'd do all that. But my job is worthless on a Bitcoin standard. It was literally just nothing. I'm saying this about myself. I used to work. I studied for 5-6 years finance. I did my CFA charter. I have my CFA charter, and I'm telling everybody who's listening to this, my job was worthless. It was literally worth, like, I did nothing. I didn't create value. I was working to make the rich a little tiny bit richer. They were buying bonds that were paying them 1% in interest, and then my the company that I worked for took 0.5%. So they made basically nothing, right? And Bitcoin just completely changes this. It completely changes the entire financial industry. It changes. I think that's one of the bigger downstream effects, and I think that actually that that is part of what you're saying. I don't think you said it in the same words, but I feel like what it's going to do is it's going to make more people. It's going to give people the freedom to do jobs that they actually like. Maybe to start more businesses. Maybe instead of having all these people who are working these crappy jobs, instead of working at a desk all day, maybe more people have the opportunity to start their own
Absolutely.
businesses because of the
Absolutely.
savings.
And I guess on the flip side, like, what do you think is the biggest downstream effect? Do you think it's the financial markets?
I think it's real estate. So right now we use real estate as a savings account.
You think
People aren't going
everybody's
to
going to
use real
sell their
estate as
real
a
estate
savings
and put
account
their money
anymore.
into Bitcoin, and the value of homes will go down long term?
That's what I think. Everybody doesn't even need to do that. That's the thing. It's the people who figure it out early are going to get a massive return
I agree.
over everybody else, right? Because over time, of course, there's going to be people like yourself, for example. You sold your house. If you sold your house 5 years ago, you'd get an even bigger benefit, right? If you sold it 10 years ago, you'd get an even bigger benefit. But over time, because you're doing it, other people are doing it. More and more people will do this, and what it's going to do is it's going to increase the supply of homes, massively increase the supply of homes. Because if you think about it, I'm not sure if you've seen this statistic, but 10% of the homes in the US are unoccupied. 15 million houses unoccupied. They're not even being used to as their utility, like what people think that they're supposed to be
People
used
just
for.
want
So
to store their
what
value
happens
and
though
have
is
it there, but nobody's in them.
exactly, right? And what happens to that? How does that change? I think the people who own those houses are going to want to get rid of them. Why would you want to continue to hold a house that's bleeding value constantly, and it's constantly just losing value, losing value, losing value? Why wouldn't you want to get rid of it? Even the land. The land is finite, and we all know that Dubai created more land, like we said. They created more beachfront property to fulfill demand for beachfront property. It doesn't matter how much Bitcoin somebody wants, you can't create more Bitcoin. And I think that's going to change things. I think it's going to just change the outlook of people. I've spoken to multiple people. I've spoken to my uncles, for example, and they're huge real estate investors. And I've told them, hey, Bitcoin is going to devalue your real estate, and you better get ready for that. And they're
They
like,
don't
no,
move it.
Bitcoin is worthless.
Oh
They
wow!
don't see it. But eventually they will. And regardless of whether they see it or not, the price of real estate is going to continue to decrease in terms
Absolutely.
of Bitcoin, right? So there's going to be people who are willing to rent properties, and they're going to be paying less and less and less over time in real terms. In nominal value, maybe the price will keep going up. The rent keeps going up in nominal terms, as in the flat dollar value. For anyone who's listening to this, maybe they don't know what the difference between nominal and real. But real is inflation adjusted. In terms of inflation adjusted, if you go to a Bitcoin standard, real estate values have plummeted. They've dropped so much, and they'll continue to drop. Right at some point, I think the price of a house is going to drop below 1 Bitcoin. Right now, it's at 4 Bitcoin. It'll go to 0.1 Bitcoin. It'll go to 0.01 Bitcoin. It'll keep dropping, and I think that's what people aren't getting right now. I think that's the biggest thing, in my opinion. And it's not just that; it changes everything. Right? Let's say, for example, if you don't have to pay a rental payment, that's 40% of your income. What can you do with the
Right.
savings?
Oh
A lot, right? A lot. You
yeah,
can change your life. You can change
absolutely.
everything,
And
right?
I
And
wonder. I guess my question comes in of like, how will Bitcoin change or increase the wealth gap? Because obviously there are people that are buying Bitcoin actively and stacking Bitcoin and are going to, like, it is going to benefit in them insanely over the long haul. But what about the people in lower class or lower middle class that don't know about Bitcoin and they're not buying any and the price is going up, and as the price goes up, their opportunity to stack and accumulate maybe zero point 0.1 or zero point 0.5 or 1 or 5 Bitcoin is getting lower and lower. what happens to those people down the line as Bitcoin grows? And like, as we see this changing financial market of like, are the rich going to keep getting richer, or are the people in the middle class who are buying Bitcoin going to get richer? But what happens to everybody else? Like, have you thought about that?
I have. So the way that I see it, regardless of whether or not somebody stacks Bitcoin today, they're going to be better off in the future. Because let's think of it this way: today, the most important thing that we pay for it's shelter, right? So the shelter is what takes away most people's income. So if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're probably living paycheck to paycheck because your rental income, your rental cost is so much, right? Um, your cost of food is so much. So what I think is going to happen is, instead of governments being able to just print money and pay for just random stupid jobs that
Mm-hmm.
have no value, all the people who are doing those jobs, if they want to continue to create value, maybe they can start their own businesses. That's number one. They I think what'll happen is that their labor is going to be attributed to creating more of the things that we actually need. So let's say there's 100 times more farmers. What happens to the price of food? If there's 100 times more real estate developers, because selling real estate is valuable, but holding it isn't. You can keep creating more and more real estate. You can keep selling it for Bitcoin, and then go back. We go back to our wages discussion. If you build a house, then you sell it and you get Bitcoin for it. You can just hold on to that Bitcoin for 10 years. That Bitcoin's worth way, way, way more, right? And what that does again is it increases the supply of homes. I think the price of housing is going to drop to its utility value. And even if somebody's making very little money, they'll be much closer to being able to buy a
That
house
makes
than they
perfect.
are today, even if they don't accumulate Bitcoin, because eventually they're going to get
Yeah,
paid in
that
Bitcoin.
that makes perfect sense. Like, even though if they're not stacking Bitcoin today, their expenses are going to get cheaper in the long haul because the value of these things is going to go down as the supply as more is
Exactly.
in supply. That's very interesting. I like that. That's good.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't word that properly, but I think over time that's just going to compound and compound, and the people who are figuring it out. And I also think that Bitcoiners are generally very generous. I've seen so many people like Andreas Antonopoulos. He said that he's given away like hundreds or thousands of Bitcoin to people because he wants to teach them. He has less Bitcoin today than he's given away. And I think what this is going to do is, again, if let's say if you live in a community and you want to improve it, you want to improve it for your kids, for your family, for your neighbors, maybe you'll donate a little bit more. Let's say you have 5 Bitcoin and eventually that 5 Bitcoin is worth $100 million. You don't need $100 million. Maybe you'll give some of that Bitcoin to your community. Maybe you'll give it to a company that you really support, and you'll help them to build something. I don't know. These are just things that I think of. Like I said, maybe this is a little
Well,
abstract. Maybe this
no,
sounds a
but
little
I think you're
crazy,
spot
but
on, and I'll use a personal example really quick about that. That post that you brought up of mine where I said, I know I'm going to get roasted for this, but I don't care. I've been driving for Uber and I talked about that. Somebody encouraged me to put my Bitcoin wallet address in the comments of that post. And that was back, I can't, you had the date up. I don't remember what date it was, but people from Twitter sent me 1.5 million sats. So at that point,
wow.
like at that time, it was worth $900 ish. And now it's at like 1,400 something. So like I've left that in one wallet. Like I had pasted a wallet address, a hot wallet address, and just sent all the Bitcoin to that one wallet. And I wanted to see it grow. I just wanted to be like, this is the money that
Yeah.
like generous people on the internet sent me that I'm going to hodl, forever. Like not, who knows how long I'm going to hodl. And
Right.
I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
want to like
Yeah.
see it grow. And their generosity of like $900 is like almost 1,500 now. And it's only been a couple of months.
That's insane. And if at some point, let's say you do get to your goal of however much Bitcoin you want to get to, and that Bitcoin is worth so much more, and you don't need that
Gift it.
wealth, you can start giving some away, right? I mean, that's my goal. If let's say, for example, all the people who all my family who um, doesn't quite understand Bitcoin and they're continuously ignoring it, and if they're struggling, maybe I can help them at some point. Maybe if somebody that I know, a family member, somebody in my community, people who aren't doing very well, if I can help them, why wouldn't I? Right? At some point, that Bitcoin is going to be worth so much, I
Exactly.
won't need it all. Right? And that's I think that's what Bitcoin does in the current system. We're pretty much just reliant on governments and on central authorities, and they keep us on our feet by spreading fear, by spreading just hate. Pretty much, we're so scared of our neighbors. We're so scared of people around us. We don't even want to communicate with them
Yeah,
anymore at this point. And I think that's part of that is the media. Part of that is how governments
I
operate.
agree. I completely agree.
Right. And
The legacy media, really.
yeah, that's it. That's it. And okay, I want to be respectful of your time. That was a great conversation. I want to ask you, do you have any final tips for my audience on, as somebody who's new to this, what they can do if they're new to Bitcoin, if they're trying to learn about it? What can they do? Maybe resources that you really found valuable. You mentioned some
Yeah.
books before as well.
Um, you know, I would say that I commented this on somebody's post the other day, and I stand by it 100%. I've never met anybody who put 100 hours into researching Bitcoin who came away and continued to have a 0% allocation. But I know a lot of people who haven't put 100 hours into Bitcoin and say it's a scam. And so, what I would say is like, if you are interested in Bitcoin, but you haven't bought any, I'm guessing my best educated guess would be that you aren't convicted enough about Bitcoin to put your hard earned dollars into it because you don't know enough about it. And if you did know more about it, you would see that the real risk is continuing to store your value in those hard earned dollars. So if you haven't made the leap, I would say keep researching. And if you have made the leap, I would just use a quote that other people have said a million times in the Bitcoin space, which is stay humble. My AirPod just fell out. Stay humble and stack sats. Like continue to work hard, continue to earn money, and continue to use it to buy Bitcoin and be patient. You know, I think like we're not gonna wake up. I'm certainly not gonna wake up tomorrow and have one whole Bitcoin. And I'm certainly not going to wake up tomorrow and Bitcoin be worth $1 million per coin. But what is going to happen is that I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to go to my 9 to 5 and I'm going to work on my side hustle in the evenings and I'm going to keep stacking Bitcoin. And before I know it, I'm going to have one whole coin. And before I know it, Bitcoin will be $1 million per coin or many more. And I will look back on these days and I will be grateful for all of the time and effort that I put into learning and stacking because it will allow you to eventually live your life the way that you want to live it. And there's not a lot of other things out there that will do that for you. So that would be my 2 cents, I guess, is like you won't ever regret putting the time into learning and you won't ever regret the Bitcoin that you buy.
Extremely valuable, and over time, it's just it gets more and more valuable. Your time that you put in. Let's say you put an hour in today. That hour, if you put in, let's say for example, if you're earning $50 an hour and you put in an hour to learn today, put $50 into Bitcoin. That hour of learning will probably be worth $500, then $5,000, then eventually $50,000, and it'll keep going and going and going because there's no there's no ceiling for how much fiat currencies can exist. There's no bottom for fiat, and there's no top for Bitcoin. And that was a great conversation with you. Any last pointers here? Anything
Nothing
else that you
else.
want to
I just want
mention?
to say I appreciate everything that you do. Like, I feel like you're one of the people that was a part of my orange pilling journey. You and a few others that I met on Twitter, and a few people, like, obviously very well known people that have been in the space for a long time. But what I just want to say is, like, people don't change their mind about Bitcoin just by hearing about it one time. People don't change their mind just because, like, one person said something about it. It's like that repeated effort of talking about it on a daily basis and wording things in ways that resonate with some people and not others. And I think like what you do is so powerful because it it might not resonate with somebody today, but you keep at it and you keep changing your approach to how you explain things. And I think more and more people are coming to Bitcoin because of you. So thank you so much for what you do. And I hope that you like never leave us until you're like super wealthy and Bitcoin's like, you're just like nowhere to be found because you're out living your good life.
I appreciate it, and I feel like I feel like it's so important that you're doing the same thing. You're sharing your opinions. You're giving people a way to study. Your content is generally very easy to digest, which I love. And I wanted you to just plug yourself. Where can my audience find you
Yeah,
if they want to
it's
follow
on
you?
Twitter and the username is at Lindsay Stamp 3. It's my only social media. I don't use anything
Yes.
else, but that's where you can find me, and I love talking to new people.
This is Lindsay, by the way. Let me show you the page. Lindsay Stamp 3. Follow her. She has great content. She's been posting regularly, and she, even if you have personal finance stuff that you need to learn about, if you have um, paying off debt, building wealth, all that stuff, she has it in her bio. Follow her. Great content. It'll be very valuable. I think you'll learn a lot from her. I've been learning a lot from you, so I'm sure other
Thank you
people
so
will
much
as
for
well.
that. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Lindsay. I really appreciate you coming on here. Maybe we can do
Would
another
love that.
episode at some point.